So here's what we're going to be painting in this video, and I gotta tell you, I may be just a little bit obsessed. I am loving this adorable little Highland cow. Look at her, y'all, with her little flower crown. She's so cute, and you know that when you hang this on your front door, all your neighbors are going to want to know where you got that, and you can tell them, I painted it. What a good feeling is that? First thing we're going to do is piece this tracer together. Now, you can probably see these dotted lines. That's what you're going to use for your guide. Now, you don't have to cut around all the lines. You just have to cut to where it meets where the lines meet the edges. So, you're just going to cut. For example, this went to where, let's get these out of the way, to where you can line it up with this one. So it's okay to have the other one just as is without being cut, because that's not going to matter. And it's not always possible to get them just perfect. And that's okay, as long as you can see well enough where it meets that it's not going to just completely destroy the image when you start tracing. But I'm picking up scraps. But you're just going to tape this together. It's not going to matter about that top piece either. But for the bottom, then we will need to find the one. This says 1 of 2, 2 of 2. Now we're going to take this bottom part that says 1 of 2, and we're going to trim along the top so that we can line it up right here. The dotted lines make it pretty easy, but it's just something that's not real precise, and you just kind of have to get it lined up as best you can. I'm going to go ahead and cut along this line too, because we know that we're going to need it cut to be able to meet the lines on the other side. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but basically we just don't want a gap that would be created by not having that trimmed off. So you just want to kind of hold it and slide it till it fits as best you can. Again, it doesn't have to come together perfectly, but this is just the best way to make a larger sized tracer template, because you can print this off just on a regular printer. And let's see, I have to stop and think about it for a minute. I think we can leave this edge, yeah, because that can slide right up under there, and then I'll need to trim this one. See, as long as I have been doing this, I still have to stop and think about it for a minute, but it's fairly self-explanatory. You just have to cut enough of the edges so that the lines slide together, and that'll make better sense once you start doing it. But see, I'm just sliding that up under there, and just lining up. Sometimes you need to look back at your reference picture to make sure things are coming together as they should. I look back at my reference picture to line things up. I look back while I'm doing the actual painting. Sometimes I need to look back to remember the colors, because I'll get so caught up in something that I won't even remember what colors I was planning on using, even when I'm the one that designed the tracer. So anyway, once you have it all pieced and taped together, then you can trim around it and just make sure that it fits on your round. Okay, so you can see that that's fitting onto the round perfectly. And when you order a tracer from me, it includes some options for sizes. Now, right now you have some options with technique. So I could go ahead and put my tracing paper down on this unprepared wood, just the raw wood, and go ahead and trace it all off. But if I do that, see, I'm going to have all these little bitty places to get around. So instead, in this instance, I'm going to go ahead and paint my background, and that way I'll just need to get that first coat of paint really, really dry, and then I can just go in and trace it off, and I don't have to worry about painting the background around these little bitty spots. And it's just a preference there. You can do it either way, but I'm choosing to paint my background first. So I'm going to paint the background, trace it off, and then I'll be back to start the actual painting. So now I've just gotten a really thin coat of this color called Bahama Blue down on my surface, and I actually used my spritz bottle to spritz it down first so that the paint would go on a little more quickly and a little more smoothly and a little thinner. And I just kind of put it on with this cheap beauty blender, and I'll do a full tutorial on that in another video. And then I used my little heat gun to get it completely dried, so it didn't take but a few minutes. And now I'm just going to take this really large sheet of graphite paper, and I'll kind of loosely tuck it around the edges just so I can make sure that my tracer is lined up right. Always make sure with the graphite paper that you keep it shiny side down, because that's where the ink is on the shiny side. And this one is pretty large, so you kind of have to feel for where the edges of your board are, just to make sure that you're not running off the edges anywhere. And I don't think we are. I just have to make sure we're centered really well. I did one the other day and I got finished and I realized I was a little off center, and we're not about perfection around here, so I guess that was okay, but it really could have been a little more centered. So anyway, I think we're there. So shiny side down for the graphite paper, and I'm just going to take this plain old ink pen and go around all the lines. Now that it's all traced off, I'm just going to go from top to bottom, and I'm going to start using this Posca paint pen on the lettering. The paint pen is optional. You can always just do this part with a brush, but a lot of times I like to do the lettering with a paint pen, and I think it's a good option, especially if you're just starting out, just to build some confidence with the lettering and not have to worry about any shaky brush strokes or anything like that. And while I'm doing this, I want to just talk about how this was actually traced. When you start tracing, it's a good idea to kind of pay attention to, it's hard for me sometimes anyway to remember where I've already been. So pay attention to where you can kind of see the ink faintly over the lines from your ink pen. That's going to help you know where to go. I also use my finger a lot of times to hold my place if I'm jumping around from one area to another on my tracer. And you'll just kind of develop your own little tricks and hacks that you do to help you with that as you go along. But that is one of the main things, just making sure that you have all your lines on there. And another thing about this particular tracer I wanted to mention is that even though I'm painting on the words Happy Fall, y'all, there is also another version included with this template pack. I think I mentioned that there's all sizes included, but also there is another version, and I'm pretty sure it just says welcome. I'll have to go back and check, but I think it just says welcome. But I opted for the Happy Fall, y'all wording. So I'm just going to finish up this black right here, and then we're going to talk about colors for the rest of the painting. For these first couple of leaves, I'm using this color called Deep Burgundy, and I'm using this little 1/4 inch flat brush. If you're more comfortable, you can use a little flat liner brush, but to me, you can just tip this brush up on this edge right here, and it's really easy, I think, to paint the edges of this leaf that way. But this is Deep Burgundy and Deco Art Americana, which is my favorite brand of paint. You can use any brand and similar colors, but I just think the Deco Art has a little bit better pigmentation, and it just works really well. Like, I'm pretty sure with this, we're not going to have but just the one coat. And to me, that's always a good thing. And I'm just going to come down here and do this leaf down here in that same color. Just using, again, the edge of my brush to get these little pointy places. And then I want to see if we want to use this burgundy color anywhere else in the flower crown, because I really like, I don't always manage it, but I really like to use all of a color that I'm going to use at one time so that I can go ahead and rinse my brush and be done with it, and not have to go back and pull out the same color later. Also, because sometimes it gets, it starts drying out on your palette, or in this case, your foam plate, which is about all I ever use for a palette. But it'll start drying out if you, if you leave it out too long. So what I'm thinking is I do want this deep burgundy on these little flowers, but I am gonna switch brushes and go to this little round brush. I might have been able to do it with the larger brush, but I think for this it just feels a little more comfortable to go in with the little liner brush. And just be sure that you're not getting your hands in the paint. I don't really mind getting paint on myself. I do mind smearing the paint though. That's the problem. So just, I think those leaves are maybe far enough from where we're painting now to kind of keep my hands from going in it. But I'm trying to think if there's anywhere else in this that I want to do the deep burgundy. So yeah, I probably should have thought about that before I ever started painting, but I think I will do the center of this flower in the deep burgundy. And these little round brushes, like I'm using right now, I just buy them in bulk from Amazon. And I like them because they have the small end, and also because they're real flexible for getting in small areas. You can just pull them around any way you want to fill that in. So we'll get this done, and then I think that may be, I don't know, all the burgundy that we're going to use. So yeah, I think so. Well, let's hit one more little leaf down here, and since I've already got this brush out, I'll just go ahead and see, this right here is where the pumpkin starts. That's not going to be leaf right there, so we just want to leave that part alone for right now and just get the leaf. Yeah, I definitely like that little 1/4-inch brush better for the leaves, but I've already got it in the water, so we'll get this one done. And it's not so bad with the little round brush. And I got out of the lines just a little bit right there, but just remember, if you do, it is not a big deal. We're going to be outlining and kind of cleaning this up a little in the end. So if you get out of the lines, it is not the end of the world. Now for some of these bigger flowers in the flower crown, I'm going to go ahead and, ooh, that is really coming out good. I didn't really need it flowing that easily for this, but I wanted to just go ahead and do some of my dark outlines so that I can tell just a little bit better about where I'm going when I paint over some of this. And then we can again touch up these outlines later. But this is just going to help me to stay where I need to be. It would help if I didn't get my fingers in it too, but I did. So it's okay. We're going to paint over it. So I'm just getting these pointy looking petals drawn out like this. And then we'll fill them in with the actual color in a minute. But you can actually go around any part of your tracer that you want to. You can actually do it with just a Sharpie. Sometimes works better than a paint pen. But anyway, that's kind of going to get that one, I think. And right here is one of those places where it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. So I'm just going to make that another pointy. You can just take a little bit of artistic license with that. And then I am going to go ahead and trace around her horns. See right there where I messed the line up a little bit? It just all comes together when you go around it with the paint pen, because you can't even tell what you where you kind of got outside the tracer. It just makes it all just come together real smooth. And I had not really intended on tracing the whole thing, but I think it's just going to make it a little bit easier. So even though it's an added step, we'll go ahead and do that. And then in the long run, it's going to make the process a little easier, because we always outline at the end anyway. But if you can use some outlines to help you stay where you need to be a little bit better, then all they're going to need at the end is a little touch up. So I think it's a whole lot of times a good idea to just go ahead and throw in your outlines. I'm sorry, y'all. I seem to be rambling a little bit. Let's finish these lines up and we'll come in with the next color. So now let's go ahead and do her horns, which is a color called Burlap, and it is also by Deco Art Americana. And then we'll do some shading later on these, but for right now, we're just basically blocking in some color. So I've gone back to this 1/4" flat brush, and I'm just gonna turn it up on its side that way to just kind of ease it around the curves of her horn. And that's really all there is to it. Just basically staying in the lines for now. And then later, we'll come in and hit it with a little bit of shading to give it some depth and dimension. Now to do her actual body, I have 3 colors down on my plate. I have burnt umber, dark chocolate, burnt umber milk chocolate, and still some of this khaki. And I didn't rinse my brush from the khaki because I'm just kind of blending as I'm going with this. Just blending her fur a little bit, and then we can actually add in a little more blending later. But her head is peeking through the little ribbons of her flower crown right here. So I want to get this filled in with the brown before we forget it, because sometimes it's easy to get kind of confused about what's what when something is really detailed like that. So just kind of mostly using the burnt umber, but I am bringing in just some little streaks of the khaki from what was left on my brush, and I'm probably going to dip back into that a little bit because I like how that looks. And this is one reason that we went ahead and outlined with the paint pen, but again, you can use a Sharpie to do that if you prefer. But this part just makes it easier. Like if you get over the lines, it's okay because you can see the black peeking through. So, you know, we can go back and we can clean it up later, but you can see where you're going. And right now I'm just kind of taking one corner of the brush in the burnt umber, one in the khaki, and you can also add just a little bit of the milk chocolate in there just to give it a little bit of we don't want it to look flat, just to make it a little more interesting, just to give it a little pop of texture. And just using that flat edge of the brush to go in the small places and not worrying about getting on the black lines, because it's not going to matter when we by the time we've outlined everything the way we want to, we're going to cover all that up anyway. So don't worry. Now these lines that I have not outlined, and I didn't because they're kind of finer lines, we do have to be just a little bit more careful around those because we want to be able to see them. But I'm using that edge to get in the little places, but really, you know, you can just go wild right here because you're going to be able to see these very black lines no matter what you do. So anyway, now I'm not getting the nose because it's going to be a different color. So I'm going back to the burnt umber with the khaki because I think I'm liking it better than the milk chocolate, but it's really just blending them out however you see fit. It's really just 3 shades of, or 2 shades of brown and one of a kind of light brown or tan color. Now, when I get up here into the nitty-gritty of the flower crown, I will probably switch to the little brush because I don't want to cover over lines I'm going to need to be seeing when we actually start painting the flowers. And I may have covered that black line a little too much, but I still think we can see it once it's dry, so it's not going to be a huge deal. But let's see. Yeah, I got a little bit on that berry. You can always take a baby wipe if you get somewhere that you didn't want it to be. So I'm just getting in these smaller areas just with this little round brush. And it's harder a little bit to do the blending here because you don't have as much room, but thankfully it's also not going to matter as much because the flower crown is the star of the show up here. But I just want to make sure I get in the centers of these little ribbons and all that good stuff before I forget. And just remember, it's not a race. You know, if it takes you a while to do this, that is all right. It takes me a long time, and I paint all the time. So if you're just starting out, you know, it's probably going to take you a little longer to get in all the little spots. And sometimes I have to stop for a minute and figure out, you know, what's what in an area. So that's okay to do that. I believe this is still her head right here. So getting this. Okay, let's see. Want to get in the little bitty places up here, and that berry is a little hard to get around, so just, you know, use the point of that little brush and get in where you need to get in. And I think that may be all of her head. I think the rest may be leaves. So we'll just drop down here and do the body right quick. So I've basically left off the milk chocolate. I'm just using the burnt umber and the burlap. I think I like them better. And that's, you know, sometimes you just have to switch midstream and decide what you like the best. And so I'm just dipping one corner of the brush in one of those colors and the other in the other. And we don't want to blend too well. We want it to look streaky on the cow because we're making her shaggy fur, or shaggy coat, whatever. We don't want that to look too blended because that's going to save us a lot when we start the highlighting and shading. That's going to be already built in. So you're just kind of slapping it on, you know, one color in the burnt umber and one in the burlap, and just go for it. And just short little strokes like that are just going to look streaky and like a shaggy little Highland cow coat, because she's going to be super cute. I don't know about y'all, but I am obsessed with Highland cows. I've been around cows to some degree all my life, but I've never seen a Highland cow in person, and I want to. But I guess till I get a chance to see one in person, I'll just keep painting them. One of the first templates that I ever painted was a Highland cow. It wasn't one of mine. It was one that I got from Tamara Bennett at Southern Adornments. But I love that one. In fact, it's hanging on my front door right now. And it's, I think, just like the head, whereas this one shows the whole body. But, yeah, I like me some Highland cows. But you can tell that's already looking real streaky, like shaggy fur, and I am here for it. And again, just don't worry if you get over some of the black lines. We're going to fix it when we go back in and outline. It's all going to be good. But just remember, I started out with using some milk chocolate too in the coat, but I'm not feeling that as much. To me, it's looking reddish on her. And if you like that look, then go ahead. But if you want it to look like this, I've just stopped with the milk chocolate and just kept going with the burnt umber and the burlap, yeah. Okay, so now, while we've got the brown out though, let's go ahead and grab a little more of the burnt umber and do the pumpkin stem. And if you go light enough, I think you're going to be able to see the black lines. And then we'll just come back over them with a paint pen in a little bit to make it look a little more fin. Now we're just going to get some of the flowers with this pretty orange color called Spiced Pumpkin. We're just going to get in the center only of this one, and then the petals will be another color. And then this, the larger flower to this side of the painting, we'll do the petals of it orange also. And just using the edge of the brush to kind of get down in the small places. Again, you could always use the little liner brush for this, but I'm just using the edge to do the hard work with it. Sometimes you can use a bigger brush than you think to get down in these little places. When it's a brush that still has maintained its sharp edge there, once you've used a brush for a while, sometimes it shows a little wear and tear and it kind of loses that. But as long as they're still like that, you can a lot of times get down smaller than what you think with it. But the liner brush is a perfectly good option too, and I may even switch to it for part of it. And I'm getting over these lines a little bit, but once we do the touch up, it's going to be fine. And I'm thinking of including a version of this tracer where the flower crown is simplified a little bit. I think it would be just as pretty with some less complex flowers. But that way, you'd have options and can do it either way you want to. So I think I will do that. Just put in, throw in a version with just some really simple flowers and not all the little tiny places on here. It's either way. Some people enjoy getting in these little places. It's a challenge, but for the most part, I just like some big old flowers that are really easy to paint. So I'm going all over these lines, but we are not worried about it because we'll be coming back with some touch up in just a little bit. Now right there, I did get a little thicker than I wanted, so I'm just covering back over that. And I may have to touch up that deep burgundy in the center too. And there is a possibility that this is gonna require 2 coats. You know, a lot of times you can't tell and you just have to decide once it's dry if it's gonna need 2 coats or not. But now I'm just gonna come on down while my brush still has the spice pumpkin on it, and I'm just gonna start the sections of the pumpkin. Now I'm starting with one of the larger sections first because I had a lot of paint on my brush and I don't want to get in the little ones with super heavy paint and have a little paint ridge. We don't like the paint ridges, and sometimes that's caused by getting too close to the edge with an overloaded brush. So a lot of times, like in a segment like this, I might start, instead of along the edge where you would probably consider the best place to start, I'll start a little bit away from the edge just to unload my brush a little bit before I ever start going around the curves along the edge of the line. So, you know, if you do get a paint ridge though, where it's thicker, closer to the line, you can always just very lightly feather that in, just with a little stroke like that. But starting away from the edge kind of eliminates the need to do that, I guess. And again, I'm going over those lines and not thinking much about it because we will be touching it and it's gonna look good. So yeah, just get around those curves with the edge of the brush. And while I've still got just a small amount of paint, then I'm gonna get up here in the littler areas. Now that my brush is mostly, it still has paint on it, but it's not like super loaded. And in fact, I probably need a little bit more right there. So, just getting in these little places, and let's finish this up and move on. Now we're just going to use this color called Joyful Pink and this small liner brush to do the ribbons and the flower centers here. So we're just like lightly dabbing into the center of each of these little flowers. And I know this Joyful Pink may seem like a fairly bright color for fall, but we just want to bring a little bit of pop to our painting. And if we end up, if you don't like this color, you can always go in and change it later. Or if you find a color that you like better, even for now. But it is a darker pink, so I think it works just for a little pop there. Another color choice that I thought about is a color called Berry Cobbler, and I really like it, but I was afraid it would be a little too close to the color of the burgundy color in here. So that's why I decided to go with the Joyful Pink. And now we're just painting these little ribbons. And unfortunately, this time, you know, I said I like to look back at my reference picture, and this time I forgot to bring it up here. So I don't remember what color I had done the ribbons to begin with, but we're going to make it work with this joyful pink. And I think this is going to kind of just make it pop a little bit. But again, feel free to use whatever color you like the best. And for that matter, whatever brand of paint you like better or feel that's in your budget. Sometimes the Deco Art Americana is slightly more expensive. To me, though, it is worth it because the coverage is better. It's a little more highly pigmented than some of the other paints you'll find, and it seems to me like I don't have to use as many coats of this. I know I did use 2 coats on the orange, but most of the time you really don't need to. So I feel like it is a good value for the price, but if you're just getting started and you want to get started for as little as possible, you know, there's nothing wrong with other paint brands. And like, I was in the dollar store. No, I was in the Dollar Tree the other day. I couldn't remember where I was. And I noticed that they do, in my area, have Deco Art. It's not the Americana, but they do have Deco Art products. So you really can't go wrong with any of them anyway. Whether it's the Americana or I think what they had in there was called Crafter's Choice or something like that. But Deco Art products are always gonna be good quality. I just tend to favor the Americana, you know, whenever possible. I always also sometimes use apple barrel products. So the kind of paint you use is not necessarily a great big deal. And you can always, if there are colors that I have suggested in the Deco Art Americana, you can usually find similar colors of another brand if that's what you decide to do. So while I've got this little liner brush, I'm just going to go ahead and jump in with some white. Speaking of different paint brands, this right here is actually apple barrel. So this white, though, is also going to brighten up our painting a little bit. And I'm just doing the petals of this flower in the white. And the good thing about painting white over this blue, if the blue peeks through a little bit, to me, that looks good under the white. I don't know, it just kind of gives it a nice little hue, I think. And that is looking really bad the way I'm doing it, but we're going to touch up those black lines, remember, so it's going to be okay. Let's see. And next, I think there was something else I wanted to do white, but I really can't remember what it was. So, while I have the white down on the palette, let's go ahead and add a little bit of black to that and work on the snout and the hooves. Let's see. This is also apple barrel, so no shame in that. What? No shame? I don't know where that came from. Nothing wrong with that. That's what I meant. And you might have seen I made a little boo-boo on that hoof. And actually I'm going to do mostly black with this and just mix in a little bit of white just to kind of soften it up a little bit so that you can actually see where the nostrils are. I'm not even gonna completely mix that, because if it's a little streaky, I think that's gonna look even better. Kind of like what we did with the fur. You know, if it's got a little bit of texture, a little bit of dimension, then that's, so you can tell I didn't completely mix that up. It's just like streaky black and white. And just let the brush get around the small places. And once we outline this, that's going to make it look so much better. I know I keep saying that, but really, those outlines make so much difference. So let's go ahead and get these, the snout and the hooves done, and we'll come back and work on the flowers. Now for our yellows, we're going to be using this color called Marigold. Saffron yellow would also be a really pretty color to use on this. I think it's just slightly lighter and brighter, but I still think it would be a good fall color. But this Marigold, I think, is just about perfect for a fall painting. So we're just going to do this leaf, that color, and then come up on back up to the flower crown and grab, we're going to make one of those flowers this same color. I like to tie in every color that I use with a little something else if I can. Doesn't always work out that way, but usually you can figure out a way to kind of bring it all together. So now I'm just going to jump up here to this flower, but I'm going to switch brushes because I do think that the little liner brush is going to do better for that. And I remember now what I was thinking that I would do white, and I'm still considering it. These little places to the smaller petals off the center, I think they could be white, and I think we will do that. But first I'm going to get all this yellow painted in and see how that's looking. Yeah, I think a little pop of white in there will look good. See, I'm thinking out loud as I'm painting this, and that's one reason I like to paint every design that I do before I list it for sale, because I don't want to give you something that's not well thought out and that you're going to have problems with. And so I like to work out all the kinks before, you know, before I even make it a product offering. So that's something that's important to me, to try to always do that. So now I'm just going to take a little bit of white and go into these smaller petals. Hopefully that's going to just give it a bright little pop. And by now I've got a lot going on my plate. So, you know, if you feel like you need to get a clean plate at any point, that's probably going to be a good idea. I probably should But I'm going to try to ride this one out just a little bit longer. Because something I was painting just the other day, I was like, how am I picking up this color that I don't even mean to? And I had some on my plate that had not completely dried, and that's what was up with that. So now we're going to take a color called Perfect Perry, and it is one of my favorite light purples, and we're going to do these little flowers up here in that color as soon as I can find it. Okay, it was hiding out behind my paint pens. So this is the Perfect Perry. It's a real pretty light purple, like a periwinkle color. And I use it a whole lot. And I'm going to be using the little liner brush again. And I'm just going to turn this so that hopefully I won't get my hands in anything that is not dry yet. Because I tend to do that. I usually have paint from wrist to elbow when I've been working on a project. But these are really tiny, so it's more of a, I guess, a tap than a brush stroke to fill this in. I really probably could even use like a little smaller liner brush for this, but this one works fairly well. This is one of my, what I call my ride or die brushes. Like, I use these for every paint party. I do like this little liner brush and this 1/4 inch brush, or it's roughly a 1/4 inch, and then one of these 1 inch wash brushes. They go with me wherever I go. So I'm going to go ahead and get these little purple ones dotted in, and then I'll come back and we'll do some, oh yeah, we still got to do the leaves. Couldn't remember what else was still missing before we start the outlines and touching it up to make it look really good. So I'm going to get this done and then come back to finish up the rest. And now we'll just take this color called Desert Cactus and the little liner brush, and we're just going to see how this Desert Cactus does, and if we need a darker green color, I have something called Hauser Dark Green we could also use. So I may just use a mix of those. Right now I'm just kind of trying to see how these are gonna look in just this Desert Cactus. It's just a really pretty soft green. There's a darker green that I use a lot too that's called Aloe. So if you're wanting something that's just a bit darker but not quite as dark as the Hauser Dark Green, Aloe would be, I think, a really good choice. And in these areas for the green, if there's a spot that you're just not sure about, I just fill it in wherever. But I do see a spot that I have made a boo-boo. I think this was supposed to be a flower petal, and I've painted it the green instead, like a leaf. So I'm going to wipe that off and come back in a minute and do white paint there. That's the good thing about wet acrylic. You can just wipe it off with a baby wipe and keep on trucking. And if I'd left it green, that would have been okay too. I think there's so much going on in this flower crown that it is doing something that I call confusing the eye, to the point that you know, it's not going to really matter that much if some things are not exactly as they were maybe intended in the original pattern. But I think like right here, I'm going to have to mix up the greens a little bit, because if they intersect too much, I don't think it's going to look as good. So, without even rinsing my brush, I'm going to put down some of this Hauser dark green. And the reason I'm not rinsing my brush is because I don't want there to be like a hard delineation or whatever there. I'm just kind of bringing that in. Well, that does have still a whole lot of the desert cactus, but that's okay. But I think anytime you can just use what's naturally going on with your color changes for a little bit of shading, that is usually going to be a good thing. And, you know, if you get it and you're not liking how it looks, you can always cover over it. So, just kind of going in with some varying shades of green right now, and I don't know if you can see, but that's doing a little streaky business like we did on the coat, but with greens this time instead, and I'm here for it. I am liking that. And you can tell it's not taking that long to paint, even though I'm using this little brush, because it just kind of goes with the flow. And as I paint, I'm noticing some areas that should have been flower petals, and I got a little crazy and thought they were leaves. That's why I'm going to be including a simplified version of this flower crayon when I list the tracers, because that way you have options, and if you don't want to do all this little detail work, you know, you can do something that's still going to be pretty without all that. So just getting kind of in there, and then I'm going to have to come back with some of that purple, because I've missed some spots that were supposed to be that purple flower. And I'm going to show you a little trick too in a minute that you can do if you see little places that you're not sure about. White dots are always going to be your friend. You can really confuse the eye with some white dots, and they're really good for a lot of little places that are a little bit confusing. Just tap in a little white and call it a day. And you can kind of see I'm not really doing a brush stroke at all. I'm just doing some little taps. And then I'm going to touch up some of that joyful pink too, that I think needs just a little more of a something. I'm not necessarily going to put a second coat over all of it, but I do just want to touch up some spots that I think just didn't get quite enough. Okay, so maybe we do need a second coat on the joyful pink. Oh, I know what else I need to do. I need to make that a flower petal instead of a leaf. Let me get this on here first, and then we'll hop in and do that. And I'm not taking any great pains with this second coat on the ribbons. I'm just kind of deepening up that color a little bit. Okay, so I don't think my white is dried out, so I've just rinsed that brush good. And now I'm just going to jump in here and fix that to be a petal instead of a leaf, because I think that's what that was meant to be. But again, don't have my reference picture up here right now. So that is about it as far as the painting part. But I'm going to switch to a clean plate and just kind of dry brush in a little bit of white for some shading. And that's one method you can do it. You can always do shading as you go, like we did with the coat, dipping one corner in one color and one in the other. But for the parts that I didn't do like that, this is a quick and easy way to get your shading. You just dip your brush and knock off most of it. And then just kind of dry brush some little highlights on. In the little sections, and I'm going to do the same thing on these leaves. Just give them a little bit of highlight. And we're still going to do some lining. Just don't overthink that. Just use that brush without a whole lot of paint on it, and just a little bit of highlight here and there wherever you think it needs it. And don't want to get too much of a good thing, so I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. And last, we'll finish up cleaning up our lines, and we're going to be done. So I'm going to start off with the Posca pen. You can also do this with just a small liner brush, but I'm just touching up these lines that I painted over. You know, when we first started, we did some outlining, but then I got paint on it as I filled in. So we're just cleaning these up to make them look nice and pretty. And it's just really whatever you prefer as to whether you want to use a paintbrush or your paint pen for this. The pen is quicker. The brush may look just slightly better, but you know, honestly, I just kind of go about 50-50 with which method that I'm using. But you just want to go around all the edges again, and then get in any little places that either don't have an outline or they need, like this leaf could use a little something right there. I'm just gonna do some little veins on it. And this pumpkin stem had some swirls that I just kind of painted over that I now need to touch up. So we're just getting all that stuff kind of taken care of now. I don't know if you can really see the little swirls that well from there, but just kind of working these in to give it a little, just to make it pop a little better. Just that the shading and the outline kind of works together just to make your painting a little more clean looking and interesting and not so just flat. And I was thinking just a little bit ago about something that I forgot to mention. All these tracers work just as well for a canvas. Like if you wanted to do this on a canvas, you could just leave off the happy fall, y'all, if you wanted to. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having that on a canvas either. But, you know, they're really versatile. You could use them either way you wanted. So, a lot of the designs that I have done, I have used on both a canvas and a door hanger, and I do both kinds of parties. Sometimes people want to do a door hanger party. Sometimes they just want to paint on the canvas, and the canvases I can usually do a little bit cheaper when I'm doing a party because the wood rounds have to be cut, and you know, wood's not cheap, so have to account for that. But yeah, we do. Oh, I missed the horn. We do both kinds of parties, the door hanger and the canvas, because like I love having a pretty door hanger, but I also love having something cute and seasonal on my mantle. And I've found that painting my decorations are a good way to be able to do that without spending a whole lot of money, because like I'm retired now and my money is, I have less of it than I used to. So that's why painting is a good hobby for me. You know, I really can't be getting into things that are going to cost a whole lot. But painting is, you know, just relatively inexpensive, and it's also, I consider it like my therapy. It's good for my soul to get up here and paint. So anyway, I'm getting a little off track, but I did want to mention that these are good for canvas or for door hangers, just however you want to use them. And I think there should have been a line for her little ear right there. And these lines are just like for her fur. I'm kind of like giving her highlights. So let's see, there's one right there. All right. Oh, I need to go around the mouth and this flower up here. And that part is just really easy and soothing when you do it with the paint pen. I do enjoy that part of it. But just getting these little divisions in the leaves in there, that's kind of fun. And for part of this, I think I'm also going to go back and do just some little light highlights in white, like around the mouth and all. So if you start highlighting with one, or not highlighting, outlining with one color, that doesn't mean you can't bring in another as you see fit, because it's just, sometimes you just have to go as the spirit moves you with this. But I just love how it starts looking when you start getting those cleaner lines. It just really, really, to me, adds to your painting. So we're just getting around all that. And yeah, these ended up getting a little messy. So that's going to clean them up too. Oh, and I remember what else I was going to do. Just some general white dots to kind of confuse the eye a little bit more up here. And this does not have to be perfect. You can tell that mine is most certainly not. Just kind of again, just going with the flow, and you know, and you get to decide when enough is enough with this part, because you could just keep going on, and sometimes less is more. But yeah, I think we're just about there, but I do want to go in with a little bit of white. And so now I'm just going to take just a tiny bit of white and just kind of go around parts of his nostril with that, just to kind of make sure they show up, and just kind of around the snout and everything too. And I think we could also use a little bit of highlight in some of these flowers. Doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit to just brighten things up here and there. And then I just want to take the end of a paintbrush, probably one of the bigger ones. So, well, that might be a little too big. Let's go with one. Okay, well, the end of just a mid-size brush like that, and I'm just going to dip it in the white, and then just do some like little dots just to make it just a little bit more interesting, and to confuse the eye just a little bit more in the areas that were a little bit ambiguous, I guess you could say. If you want them to be really uniform, dip it every time. If it doesn't matter about that, just dip it and go till you feel like you need some more on your brush, like I'm doing. I mean, on the brush end. Okay, so y'all, well, I see one more leaf that I failed to outline. But after that, I think we're about there. And then I'll just have to drill my holes I just use an electric drill and drill some holes and hang my hanger from up here. And then I protect it with a Rust-Oleum clear coat. So here she is, our adorable little fall Highland cow, and I hope you get a chance to paint her too. I'm going to drop the link to where you can get the tracer template in there. And if you're interested in just learning some basic painting in acrylics with a tracer, I'll also put the link for my DIY door hangers course. And you can grab that too if you're interested. I also have some free tracers that you can get. So if you've ever thought about painting with acrylics, I don't think there's an easier way to get started than with using a tracer. And you see, you can add your own little touches and change up colors and just really make it any way you want it. And you know, when you hang this on your door, your neighbors are going to ask you where you got it, and you're going to be able to say, I painted that. And that is a good feeling. Thanks for watching.